So just to start off with, how did you get into music? How has it led to where you are now?
Um, so how I got into music, I've kind of been writing since I was maybe like 4 years old. I know that sounds like really young. They weren't all good, don't get me wrong, like most of them were bad.
Yeah.
But it was just something I kind of always did. And then as I got older, I had terrible stage fright. So I just never really got in front of anyone, did anything. I just kept writing and writing. And then when I was like 18, kind of realized that the whole like singing dream wasn't really going away. And then I got in touch with some producers in London, and it kind of all it's a very big, messy story that kind of led from there. But that's kind of when I got into the industry as such. And then how it's led to now. So I worked with a few different types of producers for a few years. Didn't really find someone that I properly clicked with. Found that I kind of wanted like more and more creative control. And then I ended up learning production, and it's kind of gone from there now. Now I feel like I'm more of my own sound and my own identity, and now I produce, mix, master all my music and write it all and stuff. And I write for some other people like on dance labels.
Yeah, that's really cool. So do you think it's really important then, just being like as self-sufficient as possible, like learning how to mix and master your own stuff, like finding your own sound?
I think, yeah, well, I think the more self-sufficient you are, the more freedom you give yourself. So you can use a producer, and if you find a producer that really works for you, that's amazing. And if you find a mixing engineer that really works for you, again. But for me, one, you can save a lot of money if you can do it yourself. Two, you're not working to anyone else's deadlines, which can be a plus and a minus, because when you send a track off to a mastering engineer, you have to work around their workload, but then at the same time, you don't have to do it. So there's like pros and cons to that. And I do think like nowadays musicians can't just be musicians either. I know that sounds really silly, but they have to be like social media savvy. Like if you can edit your own videos, that's a good thing. If you can, you know, write for other people, that's a good thing. If you can record enough at home that you can get a vocal sent off to someone, these things kind of all are just like extra strings in your bow. So why not do them if you can? Like obviously there's time constraints, money constraints, all of that. But the more skills you pick up, the more opportunities you open up for yourself, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to what you said a bit earlier about just like when you first got into the music industry, a lot of people I speak to, that's like a huge shock. It's like very different than what you might expect. So is that the same for you?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like an idiot, but you kind of think, especially when you're a bit younger, you kind of think, people have told you you're good, you think you're good. These first songs you make, especially the first professional songs you make, you think are like amazing, and you're like, oh my god. And then you think instantly it's going to be a hit, and it's obviously not. Like it just doesn't work like that. It works like that for like one out of like a billion people. Like not even like most musicians have had to put in a lot of work, even the ones it seems like they've come from nowhere. So I think like it is a huge shock. I think as well, like our generation or my generation have grown up like watching stuff like X Factor. So it really does feel like you can become a pop star overnight. But if you're an actual working musician in the industry trying to make it the old fashioned way, it's such a graft. Like it really is. And I was kind of naive. It sounds really stupid looking back on it, but I liked to kind of expect the best out of people and expect that they were always trying to help me. And they're not always. Some people are just like snakes trying to get money out of you, or people trying to like steal some of your intellectual property and stuff like that. So you just have to be a bit more careful than it looks like you have to be, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, and then so for like people listening, how did you what sort of skills have you learned to like notice when people aren't actually genuine? Like do they tend to come across different when you first meet them?
It's a good question. I think you've got to be wary for kind of the classic scams. So anyone who sends you an email and say they love your music, but they can't name a single one of your songs, or they'll say we love what you're doing. Anyone who's being really vague about what it is, or anyone who's being too specific with what they can promise. So if someone's promising you that they'll get you 10,000 streams on a track, they're going to buy those streams. It's going to be a bot. Like you can't trust that. So I think people who are too vague in what they actually know about you, and people are too specific in things that they're promising you that they can't really promise you. And then I think it's just kind of the more experience you get, the more you kind of realize what's right and wrong. So you shouldn't be paying a manager in general, that you should be paying them on commission. So if you're earning, they're earning. But if you if you're at like an early stage of your career and someone comes to manage you but they're asking you for money, like they're taking advantage of you. Like, do you know, things like that? Like, it sounds kind of cut and dry, but you kind of, there's quite a lot of like scams that they try and use on like all upcoming musicians. So there's like groups on Facebook, you know, like UK blacklist and stuff like that, where you can type it in and it'll be like the same company's tried it with like 1,000 artists or whatever. And I do think, like, with the people you're working with, sorry.
Well, what is the UK blacklisting? That sounds quite interesting.
So on Facebook, it's called like UK Bands Advice and Blacklist or something. If you type in like that, it's a really big group with like thousands and thousands of members. So there's one which is UK Bands, Venues, Promoters or something. So that's like a group for opportunities. You can like post about an opportunity you have, or you can post like, say you're a tour manager and you're looking for venues in Brighton to host a band, you put that sort of thing in there. And then the other one is you're only allowed to post for asking for advice or to ask if someone's like been blacklisted before. So they have a lot of like pinned posts, which is like the worst offenders. So there used to be a promoter called Absent Kelly in London, and they were really bad. It was like pay to play. And I actually didn't, it was when I was first starting out and first doing original gigs, and I did a gig with them. And I realized before I even did the gig that it wasn't legit, and I kind of put my foot down and they like backed off on some of the like the payment demands and stuff. But yeah, so you'll have companies like that, or there's one called, oh, I can't remember what it's called, but they basically email you saying that they're putting together this non-profit tour all around America and they want you to submit an audition, but you have to pay for the audition. You know, things like that, where it's like, you think, oh, I shouldn't have to pay for an audition, but maybe if it's a really big opportunity, and, you know, if you're a bit naive. And the thing is, they are preying on people's like dreams and desperation. Like, people in music, they're not idiots, but they just want it so bad. So sometimes you ignore like your instincts, if you get what I mean. You know, if you're a new musician and you just really want it. And I think the music industry is so hard because most jobs, there's like a roadmap to how you do it. Like, you go to uni, you get your degree, you go on a job site or through a recruitment agency and you apply for all these jobs. And then someone offers you an interview, you go in for the interview, you do a test or whatever, and you get the job, or you don't get the job. Whereas in the music industry, there's no path. Everyone is just making their own way. And no one really wants to tell you how they made their way either. So I think a lot of musicians are quite like green and naive in the start, and they just make easy targets. Like I 100% was. And I look back on it now and you feel a bit stupid, but it's not like, you're not the bad person. You're not the one who's like taking advantage of someone. You just kind of have to like let it kind of, you know, forget about it, water off a duck's back kind of thing, and just keep moving forward, I think. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, I agree with that. Like, I think it's just like, for me, it's just as I keep progressing, I'm just a lot more wary for shit like that.
Yeah, same.
Because you kind of just see it, whereas at the beginning, like, you're not used to it, so obviously you're a lot more susceptible. And you're like, when you start off, you're like the target person for so many of those scams, so that's where they're all going to come find you.
That's the thing, because a lot of musicians come from a family, like for me, example, like no one in my family is in the music industry, no one is in the creative industry, so you can't even really ask for advice from your parents. Like, if you have someone in the industry that's older than you and has been around for a lot longer, then sometimes that's a good time to ask for advice. But in general, you kind of just have to make your own mistakes and just hope that they're not really big ones. And that is like a tough pill to swallow sometimes, but it's just the way of the music industry. It's a very strange industry. It's can be a very dangerous industry at times, but also it can be a great industry where everyone knows each other. So you just kind of have to have your wits about you at all times, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to your first live show, what would you say for someone about to do their first live show? What are the things that you wish you knew?
Oh wow! So I had the worst stage fright ever. Like, I used to do singing recitals at school, and I would like get up to go to sing, and then I would cry, run away, and then have to come back at the end when there was like 8 people left with like mascara all down my face, which is horrendous. Like, so I used to get myself so worked up and like hyperventilate and everything. And the thing is, like, what I would tell people is if you think your voice is shaking, you think you sound shit, you think, you know, you're not on your A game or whatever, no one else can tell. It's like all in your head all the time. And the anxiety, once you get through that first verse or to the first chorus, it will start to go away. You just kind of have to get your blinkers on and just focus on the track, focus on your lyrics, focus on all these things. And it kind of falls into place. And it ends up like, I love gigging now. And at the start, it was just my worst nightmare. I just couldn't do it. I put it off for so many years. And I would just say, don't put it off. All experience is good experience. Every time that I cried and ran away got me closer to the times where I didn't cry and run away. So I just think, just get it done. Like, go out there, do the first gig, and then the second one will be better. And the first gig will still probably be better than you think it's going to be in your head.
Yeah. What about like trying to get people to the gig? Did you find that hard at the beginning, or was that always quite easy?
I still think it's hard now. I really do. Like, you can have, you know, X amount of streams on Spotify, but there's a really big difference between getting someone to listen to your song, maybe it's on a playlist, like passively, and getting someone to leave their house. Usually, like when you're first starting out, your gigs will be on like a Wednesday night or something, maybe even a worse night than that. And if they are on a Saturday or a Friday night, then you're competing with everyone else's their other plans. So even like some of your best friends and your family might not really want to come. So I think it's hard. I think it's easier for people in bands because obviously you can kind of split that responsibility between you. I found that really difficult as a solo artist, that the pressure is always on you to bring the crowd and to bring that that fan base and engage everyone all the time. And it obviously is quite tiring, like being across like social media, then creating, then gigging and all this. It's a lot of hats to wear at once. So I'd say like everyone says use social media, it's your best friend. I mean, I agree and I don't agree. I'd say the best thing you can do is start an email list. Like, obviously, it's a bit retro and all this lot, but you control that information. Whereas if you're on Instagram, you're basically renting your audience from Instagram. It's Instagram's audience, it's not yours. It belongs to them, and they'll just allow you some access to it at some point. And you might have to pay for it. And more, increasingly so, if you've got a business page or a creator page, your posts are seen by fewer and fewer people until you start boosting them. So I would say if you can get an email list, or some people are doing like WhatsApp groups, even like quite big artists are doing like WhatsApp groups. That's a great way to get the news out with gigging and stuff like that. I'd say another thing in terms of bringing like a crowd to a gig is don't do a big gig in that city like too close either side, because people aren't going to come out. Like even the weekend, people aren't going to come out to see the weekend 3 times in a month, are they? They're just not. So make sure you like strategically plan your gigs, and then stick to your hometown first, I guess. And then as you start to gain confidence and get bigger there, pick like key cities outside. Don't try and spread yourself too thin, because like if I went to Derby tomorrow and just said, right, I'm going to do a gig in Derby, I would really struggle to be like, okay, I'm going to bring X amount of people, because I would just have no idea. Like I've never been there before. I've not done much research. So, and if you work with a good promoter too, that can be good. Like a promoter who does like a regular night, where, so let's say they do like a regular pop night, for example, or a regular hip hop night, then you kind of know that that event in itself has a bit of a fan base. So a little bit of the stress is taken off you, because you know that people are probably going to like the music that you're doing because you fit in with the right promotion or the right gig, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So have you found that like doing gigs and people who've never like heard you before at gigs, are they like, do they often go and like listen to your stuff after?
My favorite thing about gigs is when someone who's never heard you before comes up to you to tell you how good they think you are, and to like buy merch, or to tell you they followed you on Spotify. Like you definitely can connect with people more on a live setting. But the thing is, like if you're playing, there's a whole thing about like how when to gig and getting the right crowd in, and then some people are really good at just gigging all the time and being everywhere, and they collect fans like that. So I'm personally trying to start busking now, because I think that's a good way of doing it. So you don't have to guarantee that you're going to bring anyone in. You don't have to put that pressure on yourself. But if you go busking with like a QR code or like a sign with, you know, your Instagram handle on and stuff, you give people the opportunity to find you from that. So I've been trying to do that. I'm supposed to be going tomorrow actually busking again, like after pandemic kind of thing. And we've had people message us like afterwards, you know, on Instagram say, I didn't have any money with me, but you were so good. I'm definitely going to come to one of your gigs. So it definitely can work that way. But if you go into every gig thinking I'm going to gain 100 fans, you're probably going to walk away like a little bit disappointed, just because you are asking people to like engage with you a lot and then cross over to a new platform. I think that's the thing about Instagram. People can, you know, even if you're just asking people to go from like Instagram, Spotify, that's quite a big jump. So asking people who, you know, have had a few bevs at a gig to then go and follow you on Spotify, you got to just make it as easy for them as possible. So, you know, shout out your handle at the gigs, you know, tell them everything, get little cards that you can give out. I also think a really key thing that a lot of people forget when a gig is that you're not Britney Spears, you're not Beyonce, you're not Jay-Z. You are an independent artist trying to get fans, and you're trying to get these people to buy into not just your music, but who you are as a person and your whole journey going forward. So the best thing you can do is go talk to people in the crowd afterwards. So if there's another band on, like obviously make friends with the other band, stick around for their set, support them, because you never know when someone you're playing on a bill with can turn into a collaboration or another opportunity. They might have a gig for you. But then also try and talk to people in the crowd. Make sure anyone who wants to talk to you, you're really polite, you give them the time of day. Anyone who, you know, is just chilling by the bar, you can just like strike up a conversation, because they could be like your music but kind of on the fence about it, and then you just being a great person can like swing them into a fan. And I think you want people to buy into you, not just as a singer or a rapper or a producer or whatever, but as a human being, more and more nowadays, I think.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I guess the only thing is like when you're just speaking to someone and like you're, I guess, hoping that they will go eventually check out your music. How do you make sure that you don't come across as like trying to sell yourself? Because I feel like if you were just
Too pushy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that is a really tough one. It's something I think about a lot with social media as well, because like you're constantly asking people for something, you know, just to tell them to go to your page or tell them to listen to something, then you kind of, it seems like you're just using them. Whereas you want to make people feel like they're getting something out of their interaction with you, whether it's on social media, whether it's, you know, in person, at gigs, anything. So I just try and talk to people as if they're human beings. Like I've already kind of done my pitch on stage. I also think it's really good to just give a bit of your personality on stage as well, not just sing, but, you know, tell stories about the music kind of thing. Like give these people something that they don't get just from listening to your music. And then the nicer you are, just be a human being, ask them about themselves. I just think most people want to be nice, like they want to connect with other people. So they're not going to be like an idiot on purpose. So just, you know, be a genuine human being. Don't be like a used car salesman, like plugging your stuff all the time. But just ask them if they enjoyed the show. Ask them, you know, who else they're looking forward to seeing, what was their favorite track, what sort of music they usually listen to, have they got any bar recommendations in the area, you know, just anything to just kind of connect as a human. And then I think if they don't like your music, at least, you know, you've made someone else have a nice night, and they're more likely to remember you in the future if your music comes up again and their tastes have changed or your music's changed, just anything. Like I think treat your fans as human beings rather than as fans, and then it all kind of comes from there.
yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. Going back to Instagram, do you think it's like absolutely vital that all musicians are on Instagram?
Sorry, just say that again, you went fuzzy.
Do you think it's like absolutely vital that all musicians are on Instagram at the moment?
I find this question really hard because I personally, if I was just a person and not someone trying to make it in the entertainment industry, I wouldn't have social media because I don't like it. I more and more this year in the pandemic is kind of seemed more essential for musicians to have social media, because obviously we've lost the live part of it. So I definitely think there are a lot of pros to being on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and all of these things. But there are also a lot of cons as well. So it kind of just depends on what sort of artist you want to be. I would say be on all the major platforms, but they do say don't put yourself on all the platforms at the expense of being like really good at one or two of them. So I personally am on Twitter, but I sounds awful, but I really just don't understand it that much. I never have liked it. I never really have done much with Twitter. So I'm more just like on Instagram, and even Facebook. I've like stopped using my Facebook page. So I tend to just be on Instagram and then have a website. I would say for any musician, like it's so easy nowadays to set up a website that you should definitely do it. Like MySpace at one point was the biggest site in the world, and it went down overnight. And there was people with millions of followers on MySpace who lost all of their connection to their fans because the site went down. So you kind of never want to be on just one thing. It's always best to try and have a page that you can send people to that is your page. So if you have a website where you can collect emails, or just where people can, it's easy for them to remember what the address is, like that sort of thing is important as well as the social media. Because if one day Instagram gets banned by, I don't know, the UK government or whatever, how are you going to connect with your fans? There isn't a way for you to connect with them. So I think, yes, be on it, but I don't think musicians are making it on Instagram anymore, in my opinion. I don't think that's where people are getting their career from. I think they say a lot of, like, the panels at big music conferences about how Instagram and Spotify actually run like parallel to each other until you get to a certain point in your career. So you're growing your Instagram and that's doing its own thing, and your Spotify is doing its own thing, until at a certain point you get really big on Spotify or really big on Instagram, and then they like converge and then they grow together. So I don't think Instagram followers necessarily reflect like your Spotify followers or anything like that. So be on the platforms for sure, but I wouldn't say like get yourself worked up about them, because there's so many artists that are getting on Spotify playlists and starting to develop huge fan bases without an Instagram following at all. Like I did a collaboration with Be The Lick and DJ Clips, and Be The Lick has 80,000 monthly listeners. He's got the highest streamed version of Wicked Game on YouTube, like huge numbers, and he's got like 300 followers on Instagram because he doesn't use it. Like, I don't think it's essential. I think definitely try, but if it's not for you, it's not for you. What do you think?
Content have you found that works like for you, that people enjoy on Instagram?
What content do I think works on Instagram?
Yeah, like from your own.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Honestly, so I've started doing, I haven't done many posts for a long time, as in like a picture curated for my feed. So I do, I think on Sundays called Sunday Sessions, where I do an IGTV video. I sing a whole song, like people suggest songs, or we do this thing on my stories where I basically do, when you used to get the World Cup like pullouts when you're a kid and you'd like fill in the teams that go through to the next rounds. Well, I do that with singers and stuff. So I did like a Pop Princesses one, and we do a vote between like two pop princesses, and then they go through to like the next round, like the finals, semi-finals, like etc. So I found that's been really good for engagement. People get really into it. If you give them polls and stuff like that, people want to press buttons. Like I'm so bad for it. I'll vote on anything, even if it's something that I don't care about. So I think things like polls really work. Question boxes I think are a lot harder to get engagement with, but you can still get some like good input from fans and stuff. I've heard a lot of good things about reels. I found that Instagram definitely pushes your reels further than it pushes anything else, because it's like their new product. But I'm not sure it's like translated into anything meaningful for me so far. But I know a lot of people that it has done. But for me, on my page, I find that the polls on the stories and like fun games really work, but still music related. Things like demo drops and getting them to pick between a couple of demos. Things like I do an interview session on Thursdays where I get people to send in questions beforehand with like the question box, and we do some like live performances in there. And I tend to find that those like informal chats go down quite well. You get a lot of people who stick around and kind of chat with you and suggest songs and engage. And I found that since I've been doing that sort of thing, the more long form content, yeah, it might not get like the instant likes, but I get a lot more messages, I get a lot more comments, and a lot more what I would call like quality engagement rather than like quantity. So I think just do what is kind of authentic to you. Like for me, there's no point me pretending that I care about, posting my workout online, even though that's the sort of thing that trends. Like I sing, I write, and I play music. So I think it comes across better if I'm authentic doing that rather than trying to be something that I'm not. If you're, I guess, does that make sense? Like,
No, I actually completely agree because like you can post something, right, which might get a lot more traction immediately, but how's that going to translate to 8 months, 12 months, 2 years later? Like, how are you building the people who really want who like you now as who you are and will stick with you? I think that's why, like personally, I think that's why you see so many people like what really quick, and then they're not there 2 years later because they've taken a really short route, and it's not led to like people actually liking them for who they are, and it's really hard to like try and act like something you're not for a really long time.
yeah, definitely. It's tiring. Like pretending to be someone that you're not is like a full-time job, isn't it? It's like acting. Like I know some people like to separate their kind of like stage persona or their musical persona from who they are. But for me, I found that like my music's kind of rooted in like my own life experiences, like a lot of like authenticity, like mental health stuff, kind of relationship stuff. So for me, it's important to be the person that I am. So I will share stuff about stuff that I care about as well. So like feminism and like different types of activism that I'm interested in. So people kind of get an idea of what I'm about and like who I am. And I also think like people like to see kind of behind the scenes what you're doing in the studio, because if you are a musician that produces for themselves or does anything technical for themselves, people, you know, they're not kind of used to seeing that. So I think the more you kind of show them what you're up to, even like what your software looks like, I think people don't really, they don't see that a lot. So just to see like little bits that you're playing around with, I think people kind of like, oh, that's cool. Like they just buy into it a bit more when they get the whole story.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Just wrapping up, one last question: what's the biggest mistake that you see artists making at the moment?
Um, ooh, that's a really good question. Thing is, I make loads of mistakes as well, so it feels hypocritical. But let me think. Maybe like creating their music for a trend. So people created music with the intention of it going viral on TikTok, or creating music because they've heard someone else make music like that, rather than trying to find what it is that they do. Because you'll be irrelevant once the trend is over, even if you get picked up by the trend. Not that many people will get a career with longevity out of that. And I think the consumer often can tell if something's been created to try and like manipulate them around a trend. So if you've like made a song thinking like, oh, people will dance to this on TikTok, but not actually paid as much attention to whether it's a good track or not, that sort of thing, like not focusing on the music first. I think the music's kind of always got to be the most important thing, in my opinion. If your music's shit, then I mean, what is there? Like, what's the point?
Yeah,
I guess. Does that make sense?
100% makes sense. So where should everyone find you? And is there anything you've got coming out soon that you want people to know about?
Ooh, okay. So you can find me on, like I said, on Instagram mostly. So it's at I am CAii Music, and CAii is spelled CAii. And I'm on, my website is www.iamcai.com. I'm on all the other socials as well, exact same handle. I'm producing my third EP at the moment. It's kind of slow progress, like fitting it around everything, but that will be coming out. But I have a couple more collaborations coming out with some dance artists too. So yeah, and then every Sunday I do a new cover on my YouTube, on my Instagram channel and IGTV. And on every Thursday I do an Instagram live where I do play some new music on there. So there's stuff kind of like little tasters coming out here and there. But I reckon the EP will be out in July.